Rain tapped against the windows of the Emerald Room, one of Seattle's upscale restaurants where the wealthy came to see and be seen. For Daniel Wright, however, it was simply a place to eat alone with his thoughts and his laptop. Tonight, like most nights, he sat at his regular corner table, picking at an overpriced steak while reviewing quarterly projections. At 38, Daniel had everything money could buy. His software security company had made him millions before he turned 35. He owned a modern glass house overlooking Lake Washington, drove cars that cost more than most people's homes, and could fly anywhere in the world on a whim. Yet something was missing, something money couldn't buy. He looked up from his screen when he heard laughter from a nearby table. A family was celebrating a birthday. The father held up a phone to capture the moment as a little girl blew out candles on a chocolate cake. The mother beamed, clapping along with the other guests. "More water, Mr. Wright?" Daniel turned to see Emma Miller, the waitress who usually served his table. She was in her late 20s with warm brown eyes and an easy smile. Unlike the other staff who treated him with stiff formality, Emma had a natural way about her that made even simple interactions feel genuine. "Yes, thanks," he said, glancing back at the birthday celebration. "They seem happy." Emma followed his gaze and smiled. "The Hendersons, they come in every year for Sophie's birthday. She just turned 6. She refilled his water glass. "Will you be having dessert tonight?" Daniel shook his head. "Just the check." After Emma walked away, Daniel found himself watching her interact with the Henderson family. She crouched down to the little girl's level, speaking with animation that made the child giggle. There was something about Emma that set her apart, a natural warmth, a comfort with human connection that Daniel had never mastered. For weeks, an idea had been taking shape in Daniel's mind, an unconventional solution to fill the void in his life. Seeing Emma with that family suddenly crystallized his plan. When she returned with his check, he made a decision. "Emma, I'd like to speak with you about something. Not restaurant-related. Would you have time after your shift ends?" Emma's expression shifted to cautious curiosity. "I get off at 10. I'll wait." 3 hours later, Daniel sat in his parked Tesla as rain drummed on the roof. Emma emerged from the staff entrance, pulling her jacket tight against the early April chill. When she spotted his car, she hesitated before approaching. He rolled down the window. "I can drive you somewhere to talk, or we can go back inside." "There's a coffee shop around the corner that's open late," she said. They sat across from each other in a booth at the back of the nearly empty cafe. Emma wrapped her hands around a mug of hot chocolate, studying him. "So what's this about, Mr. Wright?" "Daniel, please." He cleared his throat. "I've been coming to the Emerald Room for over a year now. I've noticed how you are with people. With families especially." Emma shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not sure where this is going." "I want to have a child," Daniel said plainly, "and I'd like you to be the surrogate mother." Emma's eyes widened. She set down her mug with a thunk. "Excuse me. I'm offering you a business proposition. I'll pay you $500,000 to carry a child for me, plus all medical expenses, of course." "Why me? There are professional surrogates." Daniel leaned forward. "Because I've watched you. You're kind. You're healthy. You understand family in a way I never did." He paused. "I grew up in foster care. 7 homes by the time I was 16. I always promised myself that if I ever had a child, they'd have stability, security. But surely you have women in your life who—" "I don't want a relationship," Daniel interrupted. "Relationships are unpredictable. They fail. A business arrangement is clear, with defined expectations and outcomes." Emma stared at him in disbelief. "Having a baby isn't like launching a product, Mr. Wright. Children are messy and unpredictable by nature." "I'm aware of that. But the beginning doesn't have to be." For a moment, neither spoke. Rain continued to patter against the windows, blurring the streetlights outside. "Why would I even consider this?" Emma finally asked. Daniel had anticipated this question. You're working double shifts at a high-end restaurant. You rent a one-bedroom apartment in Ballard. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. He paused. And I've heard you talk to other servers about opening your own cafe someday. Emma's face flushed. You've been checking up on me? I research all significant investments thoroughly. Is that what this would be? An investment? Daniel nodded. For both of us. You invest 9 months of your life. I invest financially. You get to pursue your dream. I get to have a family. Emma laughed without humor. You really have thought this through. $500,000, Emma. No strings attached after the baby is born. The night manager began stacking chairs. Emma glanced at her watch. I need to go. Think about it, Daniel said, sliding a business card across the table. Call me when you've decided. 2 weeks passed with no word from Emma. Daniel continued his routine, dining at the Emerald Room 3 nights a week, but Emma was no longer his server. He spotted her occasionally, moving between tables on the other side of the restaurant. Then one rainy evening, his phone rang from an unknown number. This is Daniel Wright. It's Emma. Her voice was clear, resolved. I've thought about your offer. And? I have conditions. They met at a small law office in downtown Seattle. Emma had come prepared with a list of requirements written in neat handwriting on lined paper. First, she said, sitting across from him, this would be a gestational surrogacy only. The egg will come from a donor, not me. Daniel nodded. He'd already researched the options. Second, I want a proper legal agreement drawn up by independent attorneys, mine and yours. Already arranged, Daniel gestured to the lawyer waiting in the next room. Third, while I agree to reasonable medical oversight, I maintain control over my daily life, diet, and activities within healthy boundaries. That's fair. Emma took a deep breath. And finally, I want to know why. The real reason. Not the business version you gave me at the cafe. Daniel hadn't expected this. He preferred keeping people at a distance, especially when it came to his personal motivations. Why does a man who deliberately keeps everyone at arm's length suddenly want to be a father? You could donate to charities that help children. You could mentor foster kids. Why this? The question hung between them. Outside, Seattle's endless rain continued to fall, washing the city clean. When I was 8, Daniel finally said, I was placed with a family that already had 2 biological children. For 6 months, I thought I'd found home. Then the mother got pregnant again, and suddenly, there wasn't room for the foster kid anymore. He paused. Every time I've depended on someone else's choice to love me, they found a reason not to. This way, I'm the one making the choice. I'm creating the connection, not hoping someone else will offer it. Emma studied him, her expression softening slightly. And what about the child? Will they know about me? I thought we'd keep it simple. You're the surrogate, not the mother. A clean break after birth. And if the child someday wants to know who carried them. Daniel hadn't considered this. We can address that if it happens. Emma nodded slowly. I'll do it. For the money, yes. I want my cafe more than anything. But also because... She hesitated. Everyone deserves a chance at family, even if it's not the conventional way. They shook hands, an oddly formal gesture for such an intimate agreement. 3 weeks later, Emma lay on an examination table at Seattle Fertility Associates, staring at the ceiling as Dr. Patel explained the procedure. Daniel stood awkwardly in the corner of the room, trying to look professional and detached, despite the deeply personal nature of what was happening. We've selected an egg donor based on your specifications, Mr. Wright, Dr. Patel said. The fertilization was successful, and we have 3 viable embryos. We'll transfer 1 today. As Emma closed her eyes during the procedure, Daniel found himself holding his breath. This moment, clinical, sterile, and carefully planned, was the beginning of something he couldn't fully control. For a man who had built his fortune on predicting outcomes, the uncertainty was terrifying and exhilarating. Neither of them noticed the frazzled nurse who had rushed in that morning after oversleeping, the one who had hastily organized the day's samples after a minor freezer malfunction. Neither of them would know, for months to come, that in her hurry, she had made a simple, life-altering mistake. Outside, the Seattle rain turned to spring sunshine, a brief respite before the clouds would gather again. The weeks following the embryo transfer crawled by with agonizing slowness for both Daniel and Emma. After 2 failed attempts, the third embryo finally took. When Emma called Daniel with the news, his usual measured tone cracked with emotion. "You're sure? It's positive?" he asked, gripping his phone tightly in his home office overlooking Lake Washington. "Yes," Emma replied. "Dr. Patel confirmed it this morning. My HCG levels are strong. I'm officially pregnant." That evening, Daniel sent a ridiculously expensive gift basket to Emma's apartment, filled with pregnancy teas, organic crackers for morning sickness, and a gift card to a maternity store. It was both thoughtful and impersonal, perfectly capturing their unusual relationship. Summer arrived in Seattle, bringing rare clear skies and warm temperatures. Emma continued working at the Emerald Room, though the early weeks of pregnancy left her exhausted and nauseated. She hadn't told her manager about the pregnancy yet, preferring to keep her arrangement with Daniel private. At 12 weeks, they met for the first ultrasound. Daniel arrived at the clinic in a crisp suit, looking more like he was heading to a board meeting than a prenatal appointment. In the dimly lit room, Emma lay on the examination table while Dr. Patel applied cold gel to her still flat stomach. "This is an exciting milestone," Dr. Patel said warmly. "We should be able to hear the heartbeat today." Daniel stood awkwardly near the door, unsure of his place in this intimate moment. "You can come closer," Emma offered, noticing his discomfort. "It's your baby after all." He moved to stand beside the examination table, keeping a respectful distance. When the rapid whooshing sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, Daniel's carefully maintained composure slipped. Emma glanced up to see him blinking rapidly, his throat working as he swallowed. "That's..." he began, but couldn't finish. "That's your baby," Dr. Patel completed for him, pointing to the small bean-shaped figure on the screen. "Everything looks healthy, though I'm noting some measurements that are a bit unusual for the genetic profiles we have on file. Nothing concerning, just variations within the normal range." Neither Daniel nor Emma paid much attention to this comment, too captivated by the sound of the heartbeat. As they left the clinic, Daniel hesitated beside Emma's car. "Would you like to get lunch?" he asked, surprising himself with the invitation. "To celebrate the milestone." Emma considered for a moment. Their contract didn't specify social interactions, but it didn't prohibit them either. "Sure," she agreed. "I'm actually starving now that the morning sickness is easing." Over lunch at a quiet waterfront restaurant, their conversation moved beyond the clinical aspects of the pregnancy for the first time. "Have you thought about names?" Emma asked, twirling pasta on her fork. Daniel looked startled. "Not yet. I've been focused on getting through each stage." "That's very you," Emma smiled, planning one careful step at a time. "What do you mean?" "Just that you approach everything like a business strategy, even having a baby." Daniel didn't deny it. Structure and planning create security. "And sometimes life has other plans," Emma countered. She hesitated, then added, "Like my parents. They had my life all mapped out. College, law school, following in my mom's footsteps. Then I got a summer job at a bakery and discovered I loved food more than legal briefs." "Did they support your change of direction?" Emma shrugged. "Eventually, after several years of disappointment, they still hope I'll grow out of wanting to own a cafe." "Is that why you agreed to this arrangement? To prove something to them?" "I agreed because I want my own place. A cafe where people feel at home, with food that makes them happy. She paused. And maybe a little bit, because I wanted to help someone else have a family. My parents gave me that, whatever their flaws. Everyone deserves that chance. As summer turned to fall, Emma's pregnancy progressed smoothly, but her work situation became complicated. Morning shifts were manageable, but evenings at the restaurant became increasingly difficult as she battled swollen feet and fatigue. One night in her 5th month, Emma dropped an entire tray of drinks when a sudden wave of dizziness hit her. Her manager was understanding but firm. She needed to cut back her hours for safety reasons. The reduced schedule created immediate financial pressure. The surrogacy payment wouldn't come until after the birth, and Emma's savings were limited. Her small apartment suddenly seemed more cramped as she began acquiring baby supplies for Daniel. A crib sat unassembled in her living room, along with boxes of other items that would eventually go to his home. After another doctor's appointment, where her blood pressure registered slightly elevated, Dr. Patel recommended more rest and less stress. Emma left the clinic wondering how she would manage her rent with even fewer work hours. Her phone rang as she reached her car. It was Daniel. "Dr. Patel called me," he said without preamble. "She mentioned your blood pressure and the recommendation for more rest." Emma sighed. "I'm handling it." "You're carrying my child. Your health affects the baby's health." "I'm aware of that, Daniel. I'll figure something out." There was a pause on the line. "I have a suggestion," he finally said. "My house has a guest cottage on the property. It's currently empty. You could stay there until the baby is born." Emma's first instinct was to refuse. Their business arrangement had clear boundaries, and living on Daniel's property would blur those lines considerably. "I don't think that's necessary," she began. "It's not charity," he said quickly, as if anticipating her objection. "It's practical. The cottage is sitting empty. You'd have privacy, but I'd be nearby if any emergency arose. And you could rest properly without financial stress." When Emma remained silent, he added, "You can see it first before deciding. No pressure." The guest cottage turned out to be larger than Emma's entire apartment. Situated behind the main house and surrounded by towering evergreens, it offered both proximity and privacy. The interior was minimally furnished in the same modern style as Daniel's main house, all clean lines and neutral colors. "It's lacking some warmth," Daniel admitted as they toured the space. "But you could make whatever changes you want." Emma ran her hand over the granite kitchen countertop. The cottage featured a full kitchen with high-end appliances, a rare luxury after years of sharing cramped apartment kitchens with roommates. "I'd pay rent, of course," she said. Daniel shook his head. "That defeats the purpose of reducing your financial stress. I need to maintain some independence in this arrangement." They eventually agreed on a nominal rent that satisfied Emma's need for autonomy while still providing the financial relief she needed to follow doctor's orders. 3 days later, she moved in. The process was simple. Emma owned little furniture, mostly books and kitchen equipment. Daniel hired movers who completed the job in under 2 hours. That evening, Emma stepped out onto the cottage's small deck overlooking Lake Washington. The lights of the city twinkled across the water. From this vantage point, she could see Daniel in his home office through the large windows of the main house. He sat at his desk, the blue light of his computer screen illuminating his face as he worked late into the night. There was something lonely about the image. A successful man in his glass house on the hill, working alone while the rest of the world connected over dinner tables and living rooms. As fall progressed, an unexpected routine developed. Most mornings, Emma would find freshly delivered groceries on her doorstep, foods appropriate for her pregnancy, along with the occasional bunch of flowers. Though Daniel never mentioned these deliveries, Emma knew they came from him. In return, she began leaving containers of home-cooked meals on his porch. Nothing fancy, just simple, wholesome food that was better than the takeout containers she often saw in his trash. Neither of them acknowledged this exchange directly, but it created a quiet rhythm to their days. In her 6th month, Emma was organizing baby clothes in the cottage when a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Daniel standing there, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "I wanted to show you something," he said. "In the main house." Emma followed him along the stone path connecting the two buildings. Inside his modernist glass and steel home, Daniel led her upstairs to a room she hadn't seen during her brief tour weeks earlier. When he opened the door, Emma gasped softly. The former home office had been transformed into a nursery. Unlike the stark modernity of the rest of the house, this room was warm and welcoming. The walls were painted a soft grey blue, and a beautiful wooden crib stood in the center. A rocking chair sat by the window overlooking the lake, and bookshelves lined one wall, already filled with children's books. "It's beautiful," Emma said, genuinely surprised. "I didn't expect—" "What? That I'd want it to be warm?" Daniel asked with the hint of a smile. "Maybe. Or that you'd have such good taste in nursery furniture." "I had help," he admitted. "An interior designer who specializes in nurseries. But I chose the books myself." He gestured to the shelves. "These were the stories I always wished someone would read to me." Emma felt something shift between them in that moment. A glimpse of the man beneath the careful business exterior, the lonely boy who had grown up without bedtime stories. As she turned to leave the nursery, Emma felt the baby kick, a strong, definitive movement. Without thinking, she reached for Daniel's hand and placed it on her rounded belly. "Feel that?" she whispered. Daniel's eyes widened as he felt the movement under his palm. For a brief moment, his carefully constructed walls came down completely, revealing raw wonder and something that looked very much like love. Neither of them noticed the framed ultrasound image on the nursery wall, the one where Dr. Patel had noted unusual measurements that matched neither of their genetic profiles. Winter descended on Seattle with unusual force. By mid-December, the city was blanketed in snow, transforming Daniel's lakeside property into a postcard-perfect scene. The evergreen trees surrounding the cottage bent under the weight of white powder, and the lake had partially frozen near the shoreline. Inside the warm cottage, Emma stood at the kitchen counter, rolling out dough for Christmas cookies. At 7 months pregnant, her movements had slowed, but her growing belly didn't stop her from baking. The scent of cinnamon and vanilla filled the small space, creating a coziness that the modern architecture had previously lacked. A knock at the door interrupted her work. She wiped floury hands on a dish towel and opened it to find Daniel, snowflakes melting in his dark hair. "Sorry to disturb you," he said. "I was wondering if you'd join me for dinner tonight, at the main house." Emma raised an eyebrow. Their meal exchanges had continued, her leaving home-cooked dishes on his porch, him arranging grocery deliveries. But they hadn't actually eaten together since their lunch after the first ultrasound. "Any special occasion?" she asked. "The latest scan results came in," Daniel replied. "Dr. Patel sent them this morning. I thought we could review them together." "Sure," Emma agreed. "What time?" 7? I'm having food delivered from Canlis." Emma smiled. "Fancy. Let me finish these cookies and clean up." When Emma arrived at the main house that evening, she was surprised to find the usually stark living room transformed. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with simple white lights and silver ornaments. A fire crackled in the modern fireplace, and the glass dining table was set with elegant dishes. "I didn't take you for a Christmas person," Emma commented as Daniel took her coat. "I'm not, usually," he admitted, "but it seemed appropriate this year. The baby will be here in less than 2 months." They sat down to dinner, the awkwardness of their unusual relationship temporarily suspended by the shared anticipation of the baby's arrival. The food was excellent. Canlis was Seattle's finest restaurant, but Emma found herself missing the simple meals they'd been exchanging. "So, what did Dr. Patel's report say?" Emma asked as they finished the main course. Daniel retrieved his tablet and pulled up the email. "Everything looks good health-wise. Growth is normal, all organs developing properly." He hesitated. "There's just one note I found interesting. She mentions again that some measurements are unexpected given the genetic profiles." "What does that mean?" "Probably nothing. Variations happen naturally. Daniel scrolled through the report. The baby's facial structure and some other features show patterns that weren't predicted based on the donor egg and my DNA. Is that concerning? Dr. Patel doesn't seem worried, just noting it for the record. As Daniel put away the tablet, Emma noticed a large envelope on the side table. What's that? Oh, Daniel looked momentarily uncomfortable. It's the final installment of our contract. The funds will be transferred to your account when the baby is born. The reminder of their business arrangement cast a shadow over the evening. For weeks, they'd been operating in a middle ground between transaction and friendship. The envelope was a stark reminder of the temporary nature of their connection. After dinner, Daniel surprised Emma by asking if she wanted to see the rest of the nursery preparations. I've been adding things, he explained as they climbed the stairs. Books, toys, some practical items the designer suggested. The nursery had indeed evolved since Emma had last seen it. The bookshelves now held stuffed animals alongside the books. A changing table had been added, fully stocked with supplies. On a small desk in the corner sat a baby monitor and a notebook filled with Daniel's precise handwriting, feeding schedules, pediatrician options, daycare research. You've been busy, Emma observed, picking up the notebook. I like to be prepared. Emma smiled at the understatement. This is more than prepared. This is... She searched for the right word. This is love. Daniel looked away, uncomfortable with the observation. It's responsibility. Call it what you want, Emma said gently. But I see a man preparing to love his child. As she set down the notebook, Emma noticed a framed photograph she hadn't seen before. It showed a young boy, perhaps 7 or 8, standing alone in front of a modest house, his expression serious beyond his years. Is this you? She asked. Daniel nodded. My 3rd foster home, one of the better ones. You look so serious. I learned early that showing too much emotion made me vulnerable. Emma studied the child in the photograph, his guarded eyes so similar to the man standing beside her. Is that why you wanted a child this way? Complete control, minimal emotional risk? I wanted certainty, Daniel corrected. I wanted to create a family that couldn't be taken away by someone else's decision. Before Emma could respond, a sharp pain gripped her abdomen. She gasped, clutching the edge of the desk. What's wrong? Daniel was instantly alert. Just a contraction, Emma managed through gritted teeth. Braxton Hicks, the doctor mentioned them, practice contractions. Daniel led her to the rocking chair. Should I call Dr. Patel? No. Emma exhaled as the pain subsided. They're normal at this stage, but I should probably head back to the cottage and rest. Despite her protests, Daniel insisted on walking her back through the snow. At her door, he hesitated. If you need anything, call me, even in the middle of the night. Emma nodded, touched by his concern. As she watched him trudge back through the snow toward the main house, she realized how completely their lives had become intertwined, despite their efforts to maintain professional distance. Christmas came and went quietly. Emma spent the day with her parents, who remained skeptical about her surrogacy arrangement, but had gradually come to accept her decision. Daniel, as far as Emma knew, spent the holiday alone working, though she noticed the lights on his Christmas tree remained lit. As December turned to January, Emma's due date approached. The baby, active at night, seemed to be practicing gymnastics whenever she tried to sleep. During one particularly restless night, Emma bundled up and stepped onto the cottage's deck for fresh air. To her surprise, lights were still on in Daniel's home office. Through the glass walls, she could see him pacing, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing emphatically. Even from a distance, his agitation was clear. The next morning, Emma found him waiting on her porch with coffee and pastries. Trouble at work? She asked, accepting the decaf latte he offered. Daniel looked surprised. How did you know? I saw you pacing last night. Couldn't sleep. He sighed heavily. One of our major security contracts is being challenged by a competitor. It could mean a significant loss if we don't resolve it. Will you need to travel? No, Daniel said firmly. I'm not leaving Seattle until after the baby is born. The team can handle this remotely. Emma felt a rush of warmth at his commitment. The baby and I appreciate that. New Year's Eve brought more snow and dangerous road conditions. Emma's final scheduled appointment had been moved up, and Daniel drove her to the clinic with extreme caution, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Dr. Patel greeted them with her usual cheerful efficiency. Home stretch now. Let's check how everything's looking. As the doctor performed the ultrasound, her expression grew thoughtful. She took multiple measurements, checked and rechecked angles of the baby's face and skull. Is something wrong? Daniel asked, picking up on the doctor's concentrated focus. Not wrong, Dr. Patel said carefully, but I'm continuing to see some features that are unexpected based on the genetic profiles we have on file. She pointed to the screen. The facial structure has some distinct characteristics that don't align with either the egg donor's profile or yours, Mr. Wright. What does that mean? Emma asked, a hint of anxiety creeping into her voice. Genetic expression can be unpredictable, Dr. Patel explained, but I'd like to run a few additional tests, just to be thorough. Daniel's face had gone completely still, his expression unreadable. What kind of tests? Non-invasive blood work from Emma. The baby's DNA is present in the maternal bloodstream during pregnancy. The drive back to Daniel's property was tense and silent. Snow continued to fall, requiring Daniel's full attention on the treacherous roads, but Emma could sense his mind racing. You're worried, she said finally as they turned onto his private drive. I'm being practical, he replied. If there's any issue with the baby's health, I want to be prepared. I don't think that's what Dr. Patel was suggesting. Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel. Then what was she suggesting? Emma chose her words carefully. I think she's seeing features that don't match either of us, or the egg donor. That's not possible, Daniel said flatly. The embryo was created with the donor egg and my sperm. They reached the cottage, and Daniel helped Emma through the deep snow to her door. Before leaving, he paused. Whatever these tests show, it doesn't change our arrangement. But as Emma watched him walk back to the main house, she wasn't so sure. For a man who valued control and certainty above all else, unexpected genetic results could change everything. That night, the snowstorm intensified. Wind howled around the cottage, rattling the windows. Emma tried to sleep but was jolted awake by a contraction far stronger than the Braxton Hicks she'd experienced before. She checked the time, 3:17 a.m. on New Year's Eve. When another contraction hit 15 minutes later, Emma reached for her phone. The screen showed no service. The storm had knocked out the cell towers. She tried the landline Daniel had insisted on installing, but it was dead too. Another contraction came, stronger than the last. Emma pulled on her coat and boots, knowing she needed to reach the main house and Daniel's car. As she opened the door, the full force of the blizzard hit her. Snow had piled nearly 2 feet high, and the wind drove icy particles into her face. Clutching her belly, Emma began the difficult journey across the property, each step a struggle through the deep snow. Halfway there, another contraction doubled her over. As she straightened, gasping for breath in the frigid air, she looked up to see Daniel running toward her through the storm. "Emma!" he shouted over the wind. "What are you doing out here?" "The baby," she managed through chattering teeth. "It's coming, now." Daniel's security training kicked in as he wrapped his arm around Emma's waist, guiding her through the blinding snow toward the main house. "How far apart are the contractions?" he asked, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "About 10 minutes, Emma gasped, leaning heavily against him. "But getting stronger. The phones are down. I couldn't call you." "The roads will be impassable," Daniel said, calculating their options as they struggled through the snowdrifts. "And ambulance response times will be delayed in this weather." They finally reached the house, and Daniel helped Emma inside. The warmth was an immediate relief after the biting cold. He settled her on the couch and quickly gathered towels, blankets, and hot water, things he'd read about in emergency childbirth situations during his exhaustive research. "I'm calling 911, he said, reaching for his cell phone. "Maybe they can talk us through this until help arrives." To his relief, his cell service was still functioning. The 911 operator confirmed his fears. Emergency vehicles couldn't reach their location for at least an hour due to road conditions. "Sir, I need you to check how far along she is," the operator instructed. Daniel relayed the question to Emma, whose face flushed despite the pain. "I'll do it myself," she insisted. After a moment, she looked up with wide eyes. "It's happening fast. I think I need to push soon." The next hour blurred into a sequence of intense moments. Emma's cries echoing through the modernist house, Daniel following the operator's instructions with trembling hands, the storm raging outside as new life struggled to enter the world inside. At 4:47 a.m. on New Year's Day, the baby slipped into Daniel's waiting hands, tiny, slick, and perfectly formed. The infant let out a strong cry that seemed to momentarily quiet the howling wind. "It's a boy," Daniel said in wonder, helping to place the newborn on Emma's chest. "A beautiful, healthy boy." As Emma cradled the baby, both she and Daniel fell silent, staring at the child's face. Despite being minutes old, with the typical newborn redness and swelling, one thing was unmistakably clear. The baby had distinctly Asian features. Daniel's expression shifted from joy to confusion. Emma watched the transformation, her own surprise mingled with exhaustion. "Daniel," she began, but was interrupted by the sound of sirens. The ambulance had finally made it through. The paramedics worked efficiently, checking Emma and the baby, cutting the umbilical cord properly, and preparing them for transport to the hospital. Daniel followed in his SUV, his mind racing with questions he couldn't yet form into words. At the hospital, Dr. Patel rushed in, despite the holiday and the treacherous road conditions. She examined the baby thoroughly, then stepped into the hallway where Daniel waited. "Congratulations," she said. "Both Emma and the baby are doing well, considering the circumstances. He's a healthy 7 pounds, 3 ounces. "Dr. Patel," Daniel said quietly. "The baby doesn't look like me, or like the egg donor you showed me in the profile." The doctor's expression grew serious. "I noticed the same thing during the later ultrasounds, which is why I wanted additional testing." She hesitated. "I've already ordered an urgent review of our records and procedures. We need to understand what happened." "What are you saying?" Daniel's voice had an edge now. "That there was some kind of mix-up?" "It's too early to make that determination," Dr. Patel cautioned. "But yes, that's one possibility we need to investigate." Daniel's world tilted. The child he'd planned for, prepared for, and already begun to love might not be biologically his. For a man who had structured this entire process to ensure certainty and control, this revelation was devastating. "I'd like a DNA test," he said firmly. "Immediately." "We can arrange that," Dr. Patel nodded. "In the meantime, would you like to see them?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. He found Emma in a private room, looking exhausted but radiant. The baby slept peacefully in a clear bassinet beside her bed. "He's beautiful," Emma said softly as Daniel approached. "But he's not what we expected, is he?" "No," Daniel admitted, staring at the infant's face. Even in sleep, the baby's Asian heritage was evident. "Dr. Patel is investigating. She thinks there might have been a mix-up at the clinic." Emma reached for his hand. "Daniel, whatever happened, this doesn't change the fact that he's here and he needs us." Daniel withdrew his hand. "It changes everything, Emma. This wasn't our agreement." The hurt in her eyes was immediate, but Daniel couldn't bring himself to soften his position. His entire plan had been undermined by someone else's mistake. Once again, his attempt to create family on his own terms had been taken out of his control. "I'm contacting my lawyer," he said, moving toward the door. "The clinic needs to be held accountable." "And what about the baby?" Emma called after him. "What about him?" Daniel paused but didn't turn around. "I need time to think." The next few days passed in a blur of legal consultations, medical explanations, and sleepless nights. The fertility clinic launched a full investigation, which quickly identified the source of the error. An overworked nurse had switched samples during the chaotic morning of the embryo creation. "We've traced the sample," Dr. Patel explained to Daniel in a conference room at the hospital. "It belongs to Dr. Min-ho Kim, a visiting professor from Seoul National University. He and his wife created embryos for future use during his teaching year at the University of Washington." "Have they been contacted?" Daniel asked, his voice hollow. "Yes. They're flying in from Korea tomorrow." Daniel returned to his empty house, which now seemed even more sterile and unwelcoming than before. The nursery door remained closed. He couldn't bear to see the careful preparations for a child who wasn't his. Emma had been discharged from the hospital but had refused Daniel's half-hearted offer to return to the cottage. Instead, she had gone to her parents' home, taking the baby with her. "He needs a name, Daniel," she had said before leaving. "I can't keep calling him the baby." "That's not for me to decide," he had responded. Now, standing in his silent living room, Daniel caught sight of the photograph Emma had noticed, the serious little boy in front of the foster home. He remembered telling her that he wanted to create a family that couldn't be taken away by someone else's decision. The irony wasn't lost on him. The meeting with the Kims was scheduled for the following afternoon at the hospital. Daniel arrived early, still unsure what he would say or do. Emma was already there, cradling the sleeping baby. She had dark circles under her eyes, but seemed determined and composed. Dr. and Mrs. Kim arrived precisely on time. They were both in their mid-30s, impeccably dressed despite their likely jet lag. Dr. Kim was tall with a scholarly air, while his wife had a warm smile that immediately softened the tension in the room. Through a translator provided by the hospital, Dr. Kim expressed his shock at the situation. "We had planned to start our family after my return to Seoul this summer," he explained. "This is unexpected." Mrs. Kim approached Emma cautiously. "May I?" she asked in careful English, gesturing to the baby. Emma nodded and gently transferred the infant to the woman's arms. Mrs. Kim looked down at the child, her eyes filling with tears. "He is beautiful," she whispered. The legal implications were complex, as the lawyers explained. Biologically, the baby belonged to the Kims. Legally, Emma had no claim as she was not the egg donor and had signed a surrogacy contract. Daniel's position was similarly tenuous, as he was not the biological father and the surrogacy agreement specified his genetic connection. As the adults discussed options and arrangements, the baby began to fuss. Without hesitation, Emma reached for him and Mrs. Kim transferred him back. The ease of this exchange, two women putting the baby's needs first despite the complicated circumstances, struck Daniel deeply. He watched as Emma soothed the infant with practiced movements she'd perfected in just a few days. He saw Dr. Kim place a gentle hand on his wife's shoulder, offering silent support. And he realized that while he had tried to create family through contracts and control, these people were showing him what family actually meant. Adaptation, care, putting someone else's needs above your own. "I have a suggestion," Daniel said suddenly, interrupting the legal discussion. All eyes turned to him. "My property has a main house and a guest cottage. There's plenty of room for all of us." The translator conveyed his words to the Kims, who exchanged surprised glances. "What are you proposing?" Dr. Kim asked. "A shared arrangement," Daniel explained, the idea taking shape as he spoke. "Not just for now, but going forward. Dr. Kim, you mentioned your position in Seattle might become permanent. The baby would have both his biological parents and—" He glanced at Emma, the woman who carried him and cared for him from the beginning. "And you?" Mrs. Kim asked. What would be your role? Daniel hesitated. I've spent months preparing to be a father. I've read every book, created a nursery, planned a future. I know he's not biologically mine, but I still want to be part of his life, if you'll allow it. The room fell silent as the translator finished. Emma was looking at Daniel with an expression he couldn't quite read. Surprise mixed with something softer. It's unconventional, Dr. Patel said carefully, but it could work with proper legal frameworks. We would need time to consider, Dr. Kim said. This is a lifetime decision. Of course, Daniel nodded. Take all the time you need. As the meeting concluded, Emma approached Daniel in the hallway. That wasn't what I expected from you, she said. It wasn't what I expected either, he admitted. But seeing you with him, seeing the Kims, I realized something. Family isn't about contracts or control. It's about showing up, adapting, caring enough to make room for each other. Emma smiled. The first genuine smile he'd seen since the birth. The baby still needs a name, you know. Daniel looked through the window to where the Kims were speaking quietly, the infant sleeping peacefully between them. I think that's a decision we should all make together. 6 months later, on a perfect Seattle summer day, 4 adults gathered in a waterfront park to celebrate a baby's half-birthday. Ethan Minho Wright Kim sat in a carrier on a picnic blanket, reaching for the colorful mobile dangling above him. Emma, now the proud owner of a small but thriving cafe, had brought a homemade cake. The Kims, who had accepted positions at the University of Washington, brought traditional Korean gifts, and Daniel, who had learned that the best plans sometimes come from embracing the unexpected, brought a camera to capture the moment. As they sang "Happy Half-Birthday" to the giggling baby, a passerby might have been confused by this unusual gathering. 4 adults from different backgrounds, speaking in a mix of English and Korean, all focused on one happy child. But to those who knew their story, it made perfect sense. Family, they had discovered, wasn't defined by blood or contracts, but by the choice to love and the willingness to create something new together.